Oh, so we're good.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, should we call this meeting to order since we're a little past? Recording?
Thank you
All
for
right.
checking though.
All right. All right, so calling the meeting to order at 12:02. We'll go ahead and review the agenda. We did have a bit of a change up. Not quite ready to be looking at the rule writing. So that's been postponed and there was a great presentation at the board meeting, so why not share it with the CAC?
And
So-
so you can see this, I listed out all the different.
Yes, you.
Yes. Okay, that's why we weren't quite ready to just jump on
Do
that.
you anticipate that all of those are gonna come in one group?
Yeah, so
Oh,
the
okay.
permit, and so the way, and Max is here, and Max, if you want to chime in, if I'm describing any of this poorly, please do, but it's harder on the permitting side on that kind of, here's the technical kind of if-then kind of changes. So in the past, what LRAPA has done is brought forward kind of like, here's a change we're making because we want to, and we'll explain that, or here's a change we're making because this is really us being stringent with DEQ, or here's another change that's kind of structurally something that we just need to update because the system around, so kind of going through what's forced, what's ours that we're choosing, and then unpacking that more nuance with more nuance and specificity. But that is kind of what our permitting rulemaking package is looking like, all of those together. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I'll have to take a look and see, because we may want to do a 2-hour meeting, at least one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Depending on the
that
number of pages and.
how we
yeah.
do that.
Okay. All right, well, if we're all good with the agenda, we can, unless there's any proposed changes, additions. Otherwise, we can move on to public participation. We have nobody here in person. Is there anybody online?
No camera, microphone access.
Oh.
They're both showing they're running.
Uh,
So let me go to the chat.
if you click on
Wait
the,
for him or?
Yeah, he was in there and then he dropped off all.
on where it says like show there's microphone and their
Oh,
camera.
right, we need to turn that back.
Yeah, so I think if you like click on that and then allow mic and allow camera.
Thank you, because we had purposely
Yes, that's part of our
to avoid.
trying to what they call it, Zoom bombing. Back in when 2020 first kind of started and everybody's on Zoom, you'd have the ne'er-do-wells who would join your public meeting just to ne'er-do-well.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
So we have on all of our public meetings, be it Teams or Zoom, have some controls to allow us to not allow a ne'er-do-well be too distracting if that happens.
Yeah, mostly is if there's something very contentious, instead of them trying to take over the meeting, you can give them when it's time, here's the camera, here's the mic, and then you can also back it out, right?
Yeah.
So they can hear the room, we just can't hear or see them.
Yeah, it
Correct.
gives us control to let them when they want to turn
Makes
it on.
sense, yeah.
And that's a kind of part of the webinar-ish form of Teams essentially, so.
So save for that, he's not gonna be able to chime in if he's
Yeah.
camera and stuff off, so, okay,
All right.
cool.
Did you guys have any comments? Sorry to give you opportunity. All right, and Max, did you have anything you kind of wanted to add to?
No, thanks. Yeah, just appreciate the opportunity to be able to chime in if I do.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to approval of the May 26, 2026 meeting minutes. Everybody had a chance to look at those.
Couple corrections, in the round table, I think it's down the third item. I was the one who brought up the idea about transite pipe, not Evelina. She may have been the one that was talking about wildfire smoke, but I don't recall that. And then also at the bottom of page 3, the commendation for annual financial audits, that was me as well. So I'm sure everyone agrees with that.
Good catch. Perfect.
So
So with those changes, do we have, does somebody want to move to approve the meeting minutes with the corrections?
So moved.
Like that. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Moving on to Travis, who can give us a board meeting overview.
Yeah, I'm just sharing the password here for Joe, so you can get there.
Thank you.
So the June board meeting was on June 11th, second Thursday of June. Had an early start time this time around. There was an executive session that was early on, meeting under ORS 192660 subsection 2 subsection F for the purposes of considering information records that are exempt from disclosure by law, including written advice from counsel. So the board asked to go into executive session to understand some of the managerial transition items. And so we engaged and talked in executive session. From there, had an update to the director's report for the month of June, which is included in the CAC packet. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to engage on that. Had the financial report as well as Kelly talking about this Title 43 asbestos rules. Those were kind of standard fare, so to speak. Had a wonderful presentation from the Rivers to Ridges, which will be given here today for the group. We thought that that would warrant some great discussion. Kelly, it was a good idea to have them come. And then began but did not have the opportunity to finish a general fund revenue strategy conversation with the board. So the context here is the budget committee, during the budget committee cycle this spring, recognized that our general fund reserves were shrinking and recommended that the board have a assessment of that to see what opportunities could be done to grow revenue for LRAPA. And so this was a presentation to the board to walk through different revenue streams and opportunities. Some of the ones that were considered that ultimately were suggested to the board to not consider was such items like establishing a foundation for LRAPA. Other items was potentially LRAPA considering through a contract service working with DEQ to write some permits for DEQs perhaps. That also not a recommendation that was provided to the board. Revenue opportunities that we are pursuing is one, LRAPA has not been collecting interest on the liens that we assess on properties, and we do have the authority to assess the interest. So internally, we're getting together our processes so we can start tracking those interests and start to assess that. It's kind of miscellaneous revenue and nothing that will change the dynamic of the shrinking reserves, but is a place to end. Also had some conversation on Clean Air Oregon, which is a statewide program that essentially the more we do of the program, because it's a fee for service, the more we're able to generate in terms of revenue through those fees. So investing more in Clean Air Oregon was an opportunity line for the board. And then finally, I think the most direct lever for the board is an ACDP fee increase, particularly reflecting on our annual fees. Did not have the opportunity to have a full discussion with the board on that because of time, but Chair Matt Keating, he wanted us to pick up this conversation in July. And so what we're preparing for July is the continuation of that conversation with more focus on what that ACDP annual fee revenue change could potentially be. And then we didn't get to the future board agenda items because we went over and we closed. That's a high-level review of the board meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I guess I would just ask, was the reason that it wasn't recommended because of the we administer some of DEQ permits just because of the uncertainty and the.
Well, one, so the authority that, so a recent House bill, I forget exactly what the House bill number was, made it through the Oregon legislature. And that was kind of like the initiation of conversation with the board of saying, well, there was this House bill that was passed. So what does that change? And ultimately what it changed is DEQ has always had the opportunity to hire a contractor to write a permit for them. So that's not a new component. What's new is if a source comes to DEQ and says, we would like to hire this contract to write this permit for us. And DEQ says we will not allow that. If a year passes and DEQ has not issued that permit, then they can no longer say no, and the business can hire that consultant. From my perspective, if we're having a conversation about revenue generation to assure that LRAPA and the work that we're doing for Lane County is being met, then our revenue needs to be based on, come from Lane County. So I think ultimately that didn't quite address the need as is. And I have some larger mission drift questions. Like, we service Lane County. Like, the benefit of having Lane County or LRAPA servicing Lane County is it's our monitoring. We answer the phone. We have a firsthand relationship with the sources here in Lane County. So if a business wants to do a project, they go through our permitting process, which has our federal delegation control, like Title V program, and at a timeline that I think is more aggressive and more appreciated by the business community than what it would be outside of Lane County. So if we got into a circumstance where we were taking a contract for DEQ to do some work, that contract may have a higher priority than a local Lane County business that suddenly has a new project they want to do. And how can we balance that while still making sure that our focus is on Lane County? I was noting some mission friction there. And so that was part of the perspective that was shared with the board.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Any questions or comments, folks online? Well, thank you, Travis. I think with that, we can move into the presentation. So, want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, thanks for the invitation to present on our prescribed fire program on behalf of the River Sturgis Partnership. My name is Paul Gordon. I work for the city of Eugene. I've been engaged with prescribed fire operations for over 20 years. And as part of my role there as a land manager and steward of our ecological services that we provide to the citizens of Eugene and regionally. Ian, you want to do a quick intro on yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Ian Apowell at the Upper Willamette Soil and Water Conservation District. I'm also serving as the facilitator for the Rivers to Bridges Burn Group.
I'm Ed Alberson. I'm the Natural Areas Coordinator for Lane County Parks, and have been working in stewardship, natural areas management in the area for many decades. Been involved in prescribed fire as well.
And if I may, I want to thank all three of you for taking time not only to present to the board of directors, which was, a fair amount of your time, but then to do it again and for the citizens of Missouri. I really, really appreciate you all making the time and energy to do that.
Of course, glad you're interested. I thought I'd spend a few minutes, just talk a little bit about what the Rivers to Bridges Partnership is, what we're working toward, how many partners are engaged with prescribed fire, some of the goals and objectives or outcomes we hope to achieve for prescribed fire, and looking at this year, what we're hoping to achieve in terms of like areas we're burning and acreage, and then what we've accomplished in the past, addressing air quality management concerns, and talk a little bit about how we engage with the community, and also how we partner with LRAPA with this program. Let's see, a second ago.
I think if you took the mouse and then click on the PowerPoint, and then the way Windows will be on PPT. There you go. Now it should work. There you go.
Yes, thank you. We have 21 partners in the Rivers to Bridges Partnership. This started originally, I guess, a formative organization that was the West Eugene Wetlands Partnership, which was primarily the City of Eugene, Army Corps of Engineers, BLM, Nature Conservancy, kind of focused around that geography there, and then just kind of expanded the vision. And now we have 12 nonprofit organizations, 4 watershed councils, 3 land trusts such as the Kinsey River Trust, the Nature Conservancy, Greenbelt Land Trust, and many other partners such as Friends of Beaufort Park and Pisgah, Lane County, educational arm called Willamette Resources and Educational Network, and also local governments, including some federal partners and key stakeholders, including like the National Park Service, Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians, and Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and the Eugene Parks Foundation. Partners have joined together and sought community input over the last 20 years since the formation of River Sturgis to kind of revision what we're trying to achieve. Our vision statement is to improve the quality of life of residents of Upper Willamette Valley by working together to protect and enhance the region's land and water resources and their ecosystem functions and values, and to provide environmental education and compatible outdoor recreation opportunities as outlined in our 2023 vision. None of this is binding. There's no obligations no requirements to work toward these things. We just participate in this because this is what our organizations believe in. We have 3 guiding principles that we operate under for sustaining a healthy environment, which includes an interconnected system of parks and natural areas and open spaces in the Southern Willamette Valley. Second one is connecting people to nature to provide equitable access to these areas. And the third one, which ties in with prescribed fire, is stewarding the urban-rural interface. We're caring for land and waters to protect the region's scenic quality, reduce fuel loads, and promote fire-adapted landscapes. And our implementation team has identified the expansion of burning capacity as a priority action. Some of these items, or most of these items here, are some of the effects of the fire and the community benefits of fire. It's important, I think, to realize the history there with fire, because prairie and oak landscapes that we see around today are really the legacy of indigenous practices. They involved over thousands of years by burning, and have been maintained by cultural practices of indigenous people since time immemorial. And these habitats are disturbance driven, so they need the introduction of fire or flooding or these events. Otherwise, prairies and oak habitats will turn into forests, and prairie plants and animals don't live in our forests. Forests are great for other things. And so they're considered rare habitats in the Willamette Valley. They've been disturbed or destroyed over many years through agricultural practices, urbanization, and so on. And so the reduction from the original extent has been estimated to be close to 99%. And the River Sturgis Partnership was formed in part to conserve and manage some of the best remaining habitats and restore additional habitats. This is an example of what it looks like following a burn, the spring after a burn. This is south and east of Fernbridge Reservoir. It's the reservoir itself is almost visible in the top right corner there, but prairie habitat that's being encroached upon by trees and shrubs. Yep. And we've done research on prescribed fire, and we understand the effects of prescribed fire are more impactful on the native plant community, more beneficial in the native plant community than other methods of mowing or removing these trees and shrubs.
And that's the day after burning, right?
This is spring after a burn that occurred in the previous fall.
So
Yeah,
can I ask the question?
yes, you may.
Is it seeded or is this naturally?
This
occurring?
is naturally occurring, and usually you see a very dramatic response in the native plant community with flowering plants. And if seed were on the ground following a burn, the soil is blackened, and it's going to be warmer, so you get better germination, and so on. It removes a thatch. Kind of going back to this slide here, the removal of thatch is very important. Otherwise, things just kind of get buried. And it doesn't seem like much, but there's this layer of grasses and standing dead vegetation that suppress the growth.
Yeah, I have a question too, regarding the native species.
Yeah.
And this is also addressed to guys back here too, or experts on this. I understand the value to the plant species, but I have some concerns regarding like ground nesting birds, herpofauna, and other stuff that can't escape fire.
Yeah.
So that's a concern of mine to hear that there's going to be an increase to expand burning.
Sure. Those are valid concerns. I would say, our burn season is typically, our window is typically like following Labor Day through the end of October. And so, we don't have a lot of young birds or other animals. All the rearing has been done. And these creatures are, more mobile at that time of year. Our burn units are anywhere from like 1/10 of an acre in size up to roughly 150 acres in size. We're out in advance of these burns, mowing, or creating a control line to contain the fire.
It's worth pointing out the butterfly in that photo. That's the Fender's blue butterfly. It's a federally listed species.
Yeah.
This is endangered. And so, obviously a fire can kill the butterfly eggs or larvae that are within the burn unit. So the requirement is that you never burn more than 1/3 of the habitat, so that there's plenty of habitat that isn't burned where the butterflies go through their life cycle and they're able to basically come back into the burned habitat. That particular species is dependent on native lupins.
Yes.
And fire actually really enhances the growth of lupins. So it needs fire. You just don't want to burn the entire thing and kill off
How about the
butterflies. So
herpofauna?
a lot of times they'll actually go into underground burrows. The tunnels of voles and gophers and things like that. I walked around a lot of burn units like right after the burn was done. Every once in a while you see a dead snake. It's not a lot though.
Okay.
So if you think about this as a landscape that's been burning for 8,000 years, and so the plants and animals that are here are accustomed in some way or another to surviving the impacts of fire, any potential negative impacts of fire.
Thanks.
What's the?
I know.
Like,
What's this?
What's the herp,
Snakes,
Herpofauna.
salamanders,
herpofauna? I've never
Yeah.
heard that before.
Yeah.
So it's okay, I'm just wanting to look this word up because.
snakes, lizards, salamanders.
A herpetologist is somebody who
Yeah.
seeks out snakes.
That's a new word for
Okay.
Travis today. So
Me too.
Apple, watch out.
It's a good crossword puzzle.
Yeah. It's like, how do you spell?
Just call them herps.
Oh, Paul, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. These ecology burns, is there any research or data indicating how it affects the tick load in these areas? And does that have a measurable impact on public health due to Lyme disease?
I can respond to that. We've actually had researchers doing research on Mount Pisgah, Howard Buford Recreation Area, and they're studying the effects of fuels management treatments on ticks at 3 sites in Western Oregon, Corvallis, Mount Pisgah, and then down in Southern Oregon in Jackson County. And so their fuels treatments included prescribed burning and also mechanical treatments. And this is preliminary, but they did get a statistically significant reduction in tick detections in the prescribed burn units. They did not in the units that were treated mechanically. So I just say this is preliminary. It's not been published, but it kind of makes sense. And they're seeking additional funding to do research at Howard Beef Recreation Area. And so I think that's a really interesting example of all these, all these different potential benefits and how they're integrated. Benefits and impacts for that matter. There's some snakes that might die. So
Thanks, Ed. That's really valuable.
that's a good question, Ed. Yeah.
Yep, so that's the Fender's blue butterfly down in the bottom right that Ed was talking about. We follow a biological opinion issued by the Fish and Wildlife Service for managing that and burning up to like a third of their habitat, understanding that there's probably going to be some mortality to some individuals, but the benefit to the species and perpetuating that species is more, the outcome. So, and then Willamette daisy, which is another endemic species. Yeah, that's okay. Okay, so we've burned over 6,000 acres since 1986. The Nature Conservancy kind of began all of this at that time. We're at our 40th anniversary of introducing fire into the landscape. When we do this on land managers generally like to keep it on a fire return interval of every 3 to 5 years. And we think this is kind of more or less an historic pattern that we follow. And when we're out observing our sites, we can kind of tell like, oh yeah, this site we're getting more shrubs in, we're getting more thatch, and it's time to burn, kind of on that frequency as well. Not all areas are burned at this frequency. We don't burn all the areas we plan to burn in any given year. We typically burn up to we plan to burn up to 1,500 acres or so, and 300 to 500 is more realistic. So like 1/5 to 1/3 of the areas may get burned on a really good year would be like 500 acres. We've achieved up to over 700 one time. Yes.
Would you share, just for context, it's not for a lack of interest in getting fire to the ground. What are the complications? Why are you setting a mark of, say 1,500, but only getting to say 300, 500?
Yeah, well, the total acreage is based on, we're working with 8 to 10 partners who are, the land managers that want to burn or have some capacity to burn. And so they're the ones putting this out there and providing this information for LRAPA's review. And there's, I would say, probably a backlog in areas. We want to burn some sites. We've been wanting to burn every 3 to 5 years, but maybe it's more like a 5 to 7 year frequency on some of those, because there are a lot of challenges to prescribe burning. We used to have a fire season that started like in July, and then it ended like a short time after, it seemed like. But now our fire season starts in early June or mid-June, and it's more difficult to put fire on the ground based on just like this changing climate pattern, which we're observing in real time. We have very strict parameters on when we propose to burn an area in terms of like which way we want the wind to blow, what the humidity has to be, what available resources are available or can be on site, and so on. Working with federal partners, currently the nation is in IFPL4, which is the fire preparedness level, and I think it goes all up to 5. It's the highest, I believe. And so when it's at a 4, if you're a federal partner and you're hoping to burn, it's really out of the question, because they've got to dedicate their resources to fire suppression in other places of the nation, and that's what their focus is. And so as the West burns in general, it creates less opportunity to work with federal partners. This is another example of a constraint.
You can look at some of the last few years and kind of get a sense of what the factors are. So 2018 was the biggest year, and we had a really dry September and October, and so we had a lot of days where the conditions were suitable. And then 2019, there was no burning done. That's because it started raining in early September and never stopped. So we didn't have any burn days. And that was, so you can see how much the weather affects things. 2020, that was the year of the Holiday Farm Fire. And so there was smoke everywhere. So we didn't do any burning. So it's really unpredictable. That's part of the challenge.
Right, and as if our region is impacted by an intrusion of smoke from a wildfire, we're not, in some cases, we're not going to be burning either. It's not our smoke, but it's still smoke that the community is experiencing. And if the 2.5 PM,
Yeah.
sorry, is greater than 100 and trending upward, we're not burning. We reference federal air quality monitors, and we're tracking all that information. And, optics aren't good, and it's not good for health. So
I appreciate you kind of sharing and unpacking that, because I think for the CAC's knowledge is part of where we come in is that we're not fire experts. That is not what Lane Regional Air Protection does. We are exclusively focused on the particulate matter and the smoke. So what I appreciate is that we put in very clear parameters. Here's where the city is, or these large group of homes. We need the wind to go this way, the air monitors to be at a certain level, so that we can all hopefully keep the community not feeling that this is somehow burdensome or causing problems. I think you all have been phenomenal at abiding by that, and making sure that all those things are.
yeah, I would say, I said it's difficult to burn, but it's difficult to cancel the burn too. Like, we can be all ready to burn on site, ready to go, and things just are not lining up, and then we have to go home. So that happens a lot.
I've seen, remember last year, there was a couple of operations that were gonna have 40 to 60 people. It was called off 15 minutes beforehand. And that's because of wind, air quality, and making sure it's okay with local fire agency, with ODF, with y'all here, and then who is available that day. There have to be certain qualifications for the people and personnel that's there. And some of those things could include number of bodies. So there is a reliance in some groups to have volunteers there. And if they can't get enough volunteers, there's all these things that make it a very delicate process. And I'm looking forward to Paul being able to show you what it looks like when it happens here.
Yeah, so I'm using some different terminology. There's ecological fire, prescribed fire, controlled burning, cultural fire. It's really all the careful application of fire under specified conditions that we were talking about, with precautionary measures. And it can be combined with other treatments, like mechanical or manual treatments to remove fuels, to promote the health and resiliency of our fire adapted ecosystems. And so this, I'm going to play a short video clip before we get started. I just want to point out, in the foreground there, you see a crew on the ground. They're lighting the fire. Behind the truck, that small engine is out it has a pump, a tank, and a hose, and they're applying. So the area around the fire has been mowed. They're driving around the area, applying water to the perimeter to keep it well contained. You can see the black line there on the left side of the screen, how well that technique is working. This is looking to the south. Generally, we're looking in this region. This is south of Fern Ridge. We're looking for a wind from the north, and so we wouldn't do it, for example, if the wind was blowing to the east, which would put it right in metropolitan area. And so Yeah, I'll split a clip and I'll share some observations.
Paul shot this footage, by the way.
Yeah. There's also some fire under the oak here. Just pointing out these details because it's a very short clip. They introduce fire very carefully under. And it's about 90 acres. A burn like this can take, less than an hour to burn. So it's a short-term pulse, quick pulse smoke up in the air. You can see the fire as it's burning is drawing the smoke in, creating a well-consolidated column of smoke, which is rising up and being transported outside of our community. There's also people off site to the left, checking for any kind of escape. Grass fuel type is pretty common.
What year was that? Would you guess?
2018.
Drone footage?
Yeah. So we use various modeling systems to analyze the fuel types, to predict fire behavior and look at our weather patterns to predict smoke, drift, and potential impacts to the community. And as I mentioned, prior to burn, we often work to reduce woody material so things will burn more quickly and reduce the amount of smoke or the duration of the smoke going into the air. And yeah, and before a burn, we light a test fire to confirm wind direction and mixing height and so on. And this is all after permitting and checking all the boxes. We have a map that we put together every year to provide information on where we're burning. This map is used by LRAPA staff for application review. We will take screenshots of this and put it on postcards. We mail all the residents within a quarter mile of our burn areas. And if I click on the map link here, this is also available to the public. And clicking on a burn area, for example, you can learn more about this. If you live nearby, you want to know. See who owns it or who's a permittee. It's Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. The name of the unit, how large it is, wind parameters, fire district information, who to call for more information. It's an important one. People want to know. And that's that. I think that's about all I have. I've got some links for additional resources if people are interested. Can share this out, the email. And I want to say also one more time, thank you very much for your interest and I take any questions you might have. I really appreciate LRAPA's support too.
Well, that was wonderful. I see we have a question already, actually. It looks like Paul has his hand up. So yeah, if you don't mind, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, I remember after the 2018 Camp Fire, which caused the 85 fatalities down in the Paradise area in California. Afterwards, there was a press conference with one of the agency heads, I believe it was Forest Service, who was in charge of managing controlled burns to reduce fuel loads. And at a press conference, this lady presented a stack of papers, and it was about a foot high, and explained that that stack of papers was all the permits necessary, and that there were 16 different agencies, every one of which could say no up to the very moment when the prescribed burn began. And consequently, there have been no prescribed burns for several years, and the fire turned out to be devastating, 85 deaths. So I'm wondering, is that kind of scenario still a danger or something that could happen? Do all these, I see the presentation you've given, and there's a big list of all these different agencies and multicolored maps. Are all those decision makers that can say no up to the last minute?
Our fire authorities, right? So if like you're in a rural area, you've got a rural fire district. You've got to get their authorization. If you're in Lane County, you need LRAPA's authorization. You need, organizationally for each organization that burns, they have to have their approvals, and whatever partners you're working with, whoever's bringing resources to your site, which could be multiple parties, then they need to have they need to give you a thumbs up. What am I missing, guys?
The burn leadership, whoever's running the burn themselves, the qualifications.
Whoever's running the burn.
And groups underneath it, it takes a very long time to get those qualifications, and they're on the hook and liable for a lot of things that go through. So, I mean, something as simple as there's a little more smoke than we would like over a road would shut something down possibly, let alone anything catastrophic like that. There's quite a bit of sensitivity to optics and public perception of this. And that's taken very seriously as a component of, maybe not today, but in the bigger picture, it's more important to figure out how we can do this without more phone calls, without more distrust, more speculation, let alone any kind of fatality. So there's quite a bit of sensitivity and really a conservative sense of how to proceed over very, very intricate details that there's a lot of checks and balances for. Of course, something can always happen. It's never 100%, of course, but that's what everyone is trained and has these agreements at different levels for.
If I may, I think to tease out what Paul's also speaking to, I know that I've heard conversations amongst the group about wanting to try to minimize the amount of differences in the applications, because it sounds, I can't remember who they're going to, but maybe the city of Springfield Eugene Fire has a different application and burn plan template versus ODF versus, that's accurate. So there is some, I don't know what word to use it, but there's steps or processes that need to be done. We don't have a 1 foot tall pile, but we do have those that are going to potentially put out any fire, LRAPA. Who are the other, would there be any other key players, and then the agencies themselves? So kind of just those three bodies for the most part. Is that right?
Well, within the Eugene city limits, the city council has to give the approval on it. Our recreation area, actually, because it's outside any fire district, you have to get the Board of County Commissioners to issue a permit. So there's definitely a lot of bodies that have a say, and they all, whether it's staff or elected officials, they need to be up to speed on this too. And there's always turnover, and so there's also kind of a constant communication process or need for that.
I'll just add to a reflection real quick that I think that the value of the social license, or the emphasis on the social license, is really important because of all of those many different authorities that have to kind of be gone through. I think for some of the permitting that LRAPA is doing is ecological based and isn't necessarily specifically because we're trying to avoid or reduce wildfire fuel loading. So there's kind of a nuance there. I think that's important to point out. And I'll also say that broadly, so the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality is working with the U.S. Forest Service for some prescribed burns that are in the Central Oregon area to try to, and to your point, Paul, figure out how big of a stack of papers is it, and do we like it that big, or maybe there's a more efficient way to go through what is a reasonable and make sure we're doing this in a safe component from smoke, fire, and all those things. But broadly, I think in our region, like LRAPA's board is in support of this ecological burning and is appreciative of all the coordination that's allowing it to happen.
Thinking about what Paul spoke, there's also the opposite side of that card in that a prescribed burn has in the past also gotten away from the people trying to control it. I think pretty big disaster in Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of years ago on a prescribed burn that got away. And then thinking of like fuel load reduction, where you've got to say you've got more of a forested area rather than like the grass burning, that you've got that danger of what occurred in California, and that a fire was suppressed and they walked away from it, and the roots that were in the ground started burning again. And that was the disastrous fire in LA, 2 years ago, last year?
Yeah, that's a part of
Oh, the
LRAPA.
death, yeah.
And I'd say generally, if we're doing burn units in areas that have woody material, we're doing some type of manual or mechanical treatment before burning to
Mhm.
remove as much of that woody material
So it doesn't-
as possible, so that the trees that are remaining, like in an oak savanna, we don't want those trees to catch on fire, like the video that Paul
Mhm.
showed. So there's a lot of site preparation that happens. We don't just start a fire in an area that was, a oak savanna 100 years ago and is now a mixed oak conifer forest. We do the mechanical treatments first to get the habitat structure that we want, that we think will carry the kind of fire
Mhm.
that we want.
But for a fuel load burning, for brush reduction and stuff, that component would be absent.
But part of the thought process behind burning every 3 to 5 years is that we're coming back before there's much woody
Okay.
growth. Yeah, if
Great.
we were to leave it 20 years, well, we'd be starting from scratch again.
So we have our sites that are prairies or grasslands, and we have sites that are shrubby. And so, if we wanted to get that introduced fire, or what they call like a first entry of fire, it's maybe hasn't been burned in 150 years or whatever, we would do, mechanical treatment to remove the shrub, and then come back the next year probably and burn it, and then try to get it on that regular interval. It's a common thing.
So, and I think I've learned a great deal is that they do understory burns like out near Bend and some of those other, they're trying to learn how do we do this for forest fire
Mhm.
prevention. But they're two different, to Travis' point, they're two very different charts of work, right? Yeah.
We're not
In
there
scale.
with this group.
Yeah.
Like there's a clear separation of, we're not at that looking to do those projects right now. And so they're, again, a pretty conservative lens on it. I want to also add that with all of these different parts, these federal partners, state partners, regional partners, nonprofits, all these different things and all these different levels of agreements that are required. I facilitating this group, not having a background in fire beforehand, but coming in and seeing how everyone has been able to consolidate their efforts towards this permit and being hosted in this room monthly has been so invaluable, because as all the changes have happened, when some of the more identifiable partners like Forest Service, BLM, who have been like bigger roles and participants in this, now all of a sudden have to really take a big step back. Army Corps also. And because of having this consistent way and common language of applying for this permit, we've been able to find ways to work together and work on developing the area's process of how we do this. And so tomorrow we have our next meeting, and we are going to be doing like an inventory of, by organization, all the burns that are on the permit this year. And we're sharing that, inviting folks that are outside of the practitioners to be able to say, like, this is what's going to happen this year. And with all these different permits, with all these different things, with all these different specialties, especially dealing with a lot of scientists who love the details and everything, the consistent messaging and the clarity of the messaging is difficult. And so I've really found, working with this permit, I've been able to use that information to make relevant to not just public, but to our fire authorities around here. I mean, the information that's in your yearly report was based off of this for how prescribed fire does. And we can contextualize this into specifically Lane County in a way that Paul and I are part of a grant process right now that's looking at the entire Willamette Valley. And they're trying to build fire capacity to do so. And because of the coordination and collaboration in the South Valley around this permit, we are so far ahead of the other areas, and we're leading the project to hopefully get some momentum to not just get the job done, but build it as a part of the culture of the area.
I had something else. You know, we're the CAC, the Citizens Advisory Committee, and there's been a couple of people speaking up about the optics. You know, for the regular citizens, people complain a lot when there's smoke. But if this could be conveyed to the public as part of the component of this is tick eradication, I think that would go a long, long way to getting more public acceptance when, you know, there's random smoke events.
It would be nice.
It's promising.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger point is that we need to think broadly about all the public benefits, all the
Yes.
public impacts, and kind of weigh them and say, you know, we are doing this in a way that minimizes the impact of the public. It may not be zero impact, but it minimizes it. And from you know, there are all these other benefits, and those are important. We can't take those off the table. And I think most people understand that. And as long as we are able to operate, you know, as a community in a way that maintains that public trust or whatever, then I think we're doing well.
Well, I would invite you all to reach out to me so I can be a conduit to the public health messaging that we can do, because it does seem like the long game that we're talking about, plus tick eradication, definitely a big selling point.
Well, I'll also mention that the American Lung Association produced a report on prescribed burning and kind of concluded that actually if prescribed burning reduces the, you know, the amount or intensity of wildfire, that actually has a net reduction in smoke. So there's an argument there
That's
too.
what I was saying about the long game, yeah.
Yeah.
Shorter duration fires for the longer term betterment of our air quality,
Yeah,
yeah.
and fires that are being done intentionally when the atmospheric conditions are such that the smoke goes up. And so there's that kind of detail to it.
Hoping that through this group and through the work that Brendan's doing with the CWPP, that we can find bridges in these intersectional things that don't typically speak to each other, right? And CWPP that's happening right now for the
Will you
county.
share what the acronym stands
Community.
for?
Community Wildfire Protection Plan, thank you. It's being updated for the first time, I think 5 years. And it's going to have prescribed fire in it. It's going to be calling out the Rivers to Ridges group. And it's one of the only ones that we haven't been able to find any other reference for a community wildfire protection plan that includes environmental and public health factors. And so it will be quite interesting to see how this goes, because on an international level, people look to the Pacific Northwest, whether we believe we know the most about it or not, people look to us as advisory and consultation on this subject.
Thanks again.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Really appreciate
I
it.
certainly invite anyone that might be interested to tune in or drop by tomorrow. We'll be having that meeting at 1:15. The first hour will be just all the organizations going through. The last hour will be more of a general, we'll have some food, we'll talk, and for people to get more details. It's identification of who's doing what. We have an online option as well. We do this monthly, but this is the best consolidated what's going on this year. So please let us know. Matt, Travis will be there as well, helping us
We'll
out.
be meeting here.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
Thanks
this room.
to LRAPA for
Yes.
providing meeting space. for
Thank
us
you,
also.
thank you. We're hoping to have plenty of folks here and.
Well, Emmeline's great, it's just a little small.
In regard to the presentation, is that something that we could share with the members who weren't here today? Maybe
We'll make a recording of it.
for Ben and for, yeah.
Need Paul's presentation or tomorrow?
Well, actually, even the PowerPoint.
Oh,
If
yeah,
that's
we-
something that LRAP already has, would that be
share
okay
that?
to share?
Yeah, you can share that. Yeah, I think if you don't have it already.
Oh, no, I
Okay.
that's, I just wanted to get your impression is all.
Oh, yeah, of
I
course.
think
Okay.
a few of our members who couldn't make it would
Yeah.
like to
Yeah.
see that. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
So we're nearing the end, so we will transition into roundtable. Why don't we go ahead and start with folks online? Paul, you're up there on the screen, so do you have anything for roundtable?
No, I don't have anything for roundtable today.
Thank you, Paul. How about Chris?
Yeah, I don't know that I do. Obviously, we're in fire season. The rain this last weekend helped tremendously, so that's good. Still in a high level of drought, but fairly quiet. Knock on wood, all things considered. So from that lens, from the lens of what we're doing here in smoke management, smoke intrusions, everything's quiet at the moment. So feel good about that. This burning presentation, that was good. If you could email that out, I was a little bit bummed out at myself. I was going to try to screenshot a couple of the slides, and I thought about it, the presentation moved on, but I'd like to have that and look at it again. And so if you could email that out, that'd be fantastic.
Thank you, Chris. How about you, Peter?
Yeah, thank you for the very educational, thought-provoking presentation there for arranging that. I found it kind of fascinating how changing weather conditions present new challenges to that program. It's balancing a lot of pluses and community benefits and trying to do it in a way that comes out. I believe the program is excellent. It comes out net positive, and it's just it seems to be a changing and adapting program as it goes along, and I think it's very worthwhile. Thank you for it.
Thank you. All right, going around the room, Michael?
Follow up on that thing I brought up about asbestos concrete water pipe. There is over 60 miles of it in the city of Springfield, only 7 miles of it in the city of Eugene. And I'm trying to get some testing results from them as to whether there are fibers in the water, because it is recognized as a health hazard.
Where did you find that information?
SUB.
So sub.
Yeah, sub said that they have about 60 miles of it.
So they know they have.
And it's been installed since mid 60s to late 70s. So it's at its age that it's probably going to need a replacement.
It's probably all in the Washburn.
Oh no, a lot of it would be out in central. Anything that is built.
Thurston.
Yeah, a lot of South Hills, Thurston was built. The streets and utilities were installed in the
Infrastructure, yeah.
And just one other thing, in 30 years of surveying in the area, I have never gotten a tick.
Oh, not
And
gonna.
I've done surveying, yeah, but
Yeah.
Well,
I
thank you.
busted a lot of brush.
So if there's opportunity for us to like learn more about that, that maybe it not be something that we could put on for a future topic too, just to kind of.
The asbestos.
Yeah, I mean, that was really
It's not really an
exciting.
air quality situation unless you actually saw the pipe, which they do.
Which they do.
They do, I mean, when
So-
it comes to, we're gonna replace a whole bunch of stuff, us just from our regulatory responsibility would be happy to, well, they have to notify us, but being in the
Yeah.
loop,
Yeah.
that's
And knowing how they
approaching it.
are approaching it.
I don't think I have anything really. I just appreciated the presentation. Back before I was in public health, I did more ecological work. I actually worked for the city of Eugene, working in the Fender's blue butterfly habitat, collecting seeds and things. Got to know Paul through that a bit. So yeah, it was good just to bring back some of that ecology thinking, and I love how it's intersecting with public health because there's all sorts of overlap, of course. So yeah, the only question I kind of wish we'd have more time to talk about is just a little bit more to hear how they're working with their tribal partners, our tribal partners, especially with that.
I will say that the tribal partners from our perspective are involved, and there was Chalamali was the name of the burn that there was interest in wanting to try to do some wintertime burning a little bit. And from my perspective, I have a little bit more anxiety over that, because if we have a stagnant air mass and then they put, the weather doesn't happen the way it was, and instead, have this PM that's now stuck in a valley for who knows how long until the next. So I have a little more hesitancy on that. But we did a focus kind of like, well, let's see, and had a successful burn last year. So the tribes are involved looking for those specific culturally significant places they can do some burning.
You probably have more variable winds in the winter too,
Yeah.
to say it's blowing this way. Oh, now it's blowing this way.
Yeah, I think as long as the air's moving, you'll know that it'll kind of like disperse out. It's more like the air's stagnant and stuck for days on end. And if you introduce PMs there, then it's like, well, it's just gonna stay. So, yeah.
So, but that's a really interesting point, Travis. And I'm glad to hear you bring it up. It's like, from a safety standpoint, it's much better to do it in the wintertime if you can. I don't know if it was Paul, or I think maybe it was Paul mentioned the campfire, some of the other larger fires. There have been significantly devastating, both personal property and life escape fires around the nation. Somebody mentioned Colorado. You might have been thinking New Mexico 2 or 3 years ago. Largest, most destructive fires, most costly fires in all of New Mexico's history coming out of prescribed fires. Same thing happened. All the fuels reduction stuff was a knee jerk from, I think it was the early 2000s to the Los Alamos nuclear laboratory almost burnt down. 400 structures burnt down. Most destructive fire in U.S. history, I think at the time, down in would have been New Mexico, around the Los Alamos nuclear laboratory. That was from a prescribed fire. So the wintertime, even though you've got the potential stagnant air, it's a much safer time to do it. And we also don't, it's really interesting. The other interesting, I think, social license part to this entire thing is, we come along in Lane County, Oregon, and we say, you are not burning any longer. It's not safe. We tell all of our public it's not safe to burn. And then we come along during the most critical time of fire danger, August and September, and we're trying to burn. And it's just a really complicated place for myself to be, for the rural fire departments to be, for other land managers to be. It's a sticky widget. So if we could get some of that stuff done in the wintertime during some of those cold spells, I know it runs into the LRAPA and the air stagnation stuff, but there might be some real opportunities there as well, which would help negate some of those other factors that show themselves as a hindrance. But
Chris, I mean, I agree, and it's too, as like the wildfire season or the fire season gets longer, and then resources are not as available nationally because of that. The shoulder wintertime months become more opportunity based, and LRAPA, I think our posture is we don't want to be the no say way Jose kind of component to that, but just a cautious kind of approach.
Well,
I agree.
I know ODF and folks like that outside of the valley, there is a lot of burning that occurs in slash piles and things like that for a fact, because there's actually good ventilation and good flow. So it's just unfortunately at the valley level where everybody lives too, that we have the cross section of both stagnation and,
Yeah, a number of years ago, the CAC actually looked at some of the burning, prescribed burning and cultural burning, because it was becoming much more prevalent. And it was interesting because the messaging is really kind of confusing to the general public. And at one point they were talking about like good smoke versus bad smoke, and they're like, no smoke is good smoke. So trying to think about our messaging and how to like really get people to kind of understand that prescribed burning is really, even though it is creating its overall reduction, but the messaging, and I would agree, Chris, it can be confusing when nobody else can burn and then they're choosing that season. So I think differentiating between safety, health, those types of things is probably a little bit more critical, could use some more effort. So, well, this is great. We are over by about 5 minutes, so I apologize, but I think that was a really wonderful presentation and discussion. So thank you, everybody. Unless anybody has any finishing thoughts, we should probably go ahead and adjourn.
No meeting next month?
Oh, yes, that's a good thought. So there's no meeting in August. The next meeting will be in September. And I think at that point, we'll be prepared to bring kind of some rulemaking items to the CAC. So we'll have to, well.
You said no meeting in August.
No meeting in
But
August.
July.
July will be.
Or, excuse me, yeah, July.
So no meeting in July.
There's a meeting, there is a meeting in July.
Yeah, there is one. Okay, good.
It's in August.
Okay, perfect. So yes, we do have one next.
I've already moved on to, I know it's kind of
Yeah, it's
June
almost.
30th,
Fewer
but
hours.
yeah, so yes.
We do have one in July. Do we anticipate we're gonna be on schedule for this?
Yes, I think that we're, tentatively, that's the approach is one of the things we'll have to do now. I know that getting the items material early to the CAC is important and helpful. I think Max is in kind of a good spot for us to like be able to deliver on that. And then I think it becomes a question of like, is a 1 hour appropriate or do we want a 2 hour, the window? And that's, I think, as we get closer to July.
Once we see that packet, we'll probably have a better idea too. Because I've, kind of looked through these, but it also depends on how much red line, how much changes red
Yeah.
would be. So it
And-
could be helpful to just, have it.
Because there's lots there to go through.
There
too, so-
All right, well, keep that in mind, folks, if you could, that if possible, depending on the packet size, maybe try to do a 2 hour meeting instead of one if and it's okay, of course, if people can't make it. But that might be something that could actually expedite the review too. All right, well, thanks, everybody. Sure appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, that got a lot more interaction